Welcome to Inside Politics with Kevin Klein, Jeff Courier, and Royce Coop, where we break down the stories shaping our country.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Inside Politics. I'm Kevin Klein, joined by two of my esteemed colleagues from the Winnipeg Sun. We have Jeff Courier and Royce Coop, who is also a professor of political science at the University of Manitoba, and neither Jeff nor I hold that against him. Well, thank you very much for joining us. I think this is going to be an exciting episode. We are taping on Friday, March 14th, a big day in Canada and for people, I think throughout North America. A new Prime Minister has been sworn in. A guy who I think, 8 months ago didn't even live in Canada, and now has a new cabinet, much like the old cabinet, and is about ready to lead our country into who knows what. Royce, political science professor, we want your thoughts first.
Yeah, well, it's true about him living in the country, and this is the guy I wrote about this in the Sun for tomorrow. A guy with absolutely no political experience, zero. The first prime minister in Canadian history to come into the role without any elected experience whatsoever. And so,
Okay,
I
well,
think
hang on a second. Hang on.
yeah,
Sorry. But isn't that a good thing in some way? I'm not sticking up for Carney, but I mean, I think we need non-political people in politics. But anyways, I'll just throw that in and go back to you. Sorry.
it certainly could be, but the point is that this has to be one of the biggest gambles in Canadian history. The party putting all of its faith into someone who never proven themselves as an elected official before. So it's going to be remarkable to see what happens. It's a very hard thing, the idea of succession. Choosing a new leader and winning an election, that's a tough thing to pull off. And it's a brand new experiment. A prime minister with no experience as an elected official. It's going to be very interesting to see.
Royce, on what basis did Mark Carney run away with this leadership? What was it that he brought to the table that convinced all the card-carrying members of the Liberal Party of Canada that he is the guy? And we're seeing in the polling that Canadians are warming up to the guy. What's that based on?
I have no idea. It was an open race. He did have support within the party. He had the most support from members of the caucus, and that's fantastic. That means that they can lend their little organizations to him, use that to bring out people to vote for him. But I'm really not sure. The Liberal Party, as we saw with Michael Ignatieff, they can be quite hypnotized by credentials, by the idea of importing an impressive person who's made a name for himself both in Canada and abroad. But it's undeniable. 86%. That is a vote share that would make Saddam Hussein blush. It's very impressive for Mark Carney.
So
Well, and the one thing that he may have in his favor, which apparently nobody in that government has ever had, is that he knows how to do basic mathematics. The guy can add and subtract, which nobody else in that government has been able to do.
well,
But beyond that, you're right. This is a guy with no political experience. He's never had to run a government office. He's never had to do any of the things connected to government, never mind the campaigning and the politicking and question period and all the rest of that stuff. Just the running of government is a massive job. And so who is he surrounded by that we should have confidence in? And it's the same people that Justin Trudeau had surrounding him, in whom we have no confidence anymore.
well, look, I think there's arguments on all sides that politicians or people with political experience may be nice, but I think that we've done that for years and years and years. And again, I want to preface this, but please do not put in comments that I'm a supporter of Carney. I am not. I'm a supporter of getting different type of people in politics, but we've seen a lot of his policies already, and a lot of them have failed, and I don't think they're going to work well for Canada. I think what we have, what I like to call is look a squirrel syndrome here, right? Trudeau's bad, Trudeau's bad. Along comes this Carney guy who was the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England and so on. And we went, oh, look, a squirrel. And we forgot about everything else that Trudeau's done and what the Trudeau government has done, $11 billion sent out of the country and on who knows, that was one project. And I think, quite frankly, I had a friend who's quite involved in politics, and I don't want to give his name, but I have a lot of respect for this guy who said I should be questioning whether or not, or thinking about whether or not this was free land, and a lot of people inside the back rooms of the Liberal Party that had free land quit the way she quit, when she quit, to force Trudeau out and get Carney in. I mean, let's remember, Carney is the godfather to her child. So I think this is what we're seeing in politics all across Canada, is there's a whole whack of people behind the curtain that run these political parties, and that's what we're seeing here. I think the real concern for me is not how he got there or why he got there or his cabinet right now. The concern is how do we engage with Canadians to do your research and to get out and vote. The last election was, I think, the lowest voter turnout in a federal election for decades, I believe. Royce can correct me on that. I think the real problem here is that we have the tariffs going on. We have Carney being new, and he's a new squirrel. Look, a squirrel. All this, but as all this noise is happening, the real problems in Canada are still there and getting worse. $225 billion in lost investment in less than 10 years in Canada. $225 billion. Yeah. That's substantial. How do we keep going, guys?
Well, we can't keep going the way we have been. By the government's own projections, by the end of this decade, the interest on Canada's debt, okay, so this is just interest payments. This is money that Canadians will be spending and getting nothing for. The government's own projections by the end of this decade say that it's going to cost us $70 billion a year to service our debt. $70 billion. Now, just imagine your credit card. If you boil that down to your own credit card, and that kind of money that you're spending on interest to get nothing for. So yeah, and that's just one of the issues that we're dealing with here. Head offices have declined in Canada since 2012. The number of head offices in Canada has declined by about 5% in the last 15 years. That's a problem as well. It shows that there's a lack of confidence in investing in this country and in doing business in this country.
Yeah, a lot of this is a product of 9 years of a government that was led by Justin Trudeau, certainly the fiscal irresponsibility, the giant debt. We now have this at the worst possible time when we're facing tariffs from the United States. And with that in mind, I was actually very surprised when Mark Carney had the opportunity to put a new face on his government, on his war cabinet, as people are calling it. There's still a lot of ministers in that cabinet that are closely identified with Justin Trudeau, closely identified with fiscal irresponsibility, with lack of development. I mean, Stephen Guilbeault, I believe, is still in the cabinet, the most damaging minister from the Trudeau years. He made the worst decisions that have put Canada in the weakest possible position at this time. He should have been out on his rear end. Carney should have kicked him out, and yet he's still there. What a strategic mistake, I think, for him to have done that.
But guys, listen, from somebody who was inside a political party, I was, as an MLA, as a minister, I can tell you, all these leadership races come with major promises made. And these are all promises being kept. You come out and support me, I'll give you this, I'll give you that, I'll give you this. It has absolutely nothing to do with how to run the province or the country better. It has to do with getting that seat of power. Everybody's power hungry. So Carney probably, I can't say he did with certainty, but probably just made promises to all these people for them to come out and support him and to do everything that they could to get him votes. And that's a problem that I see within the political party system. And we have it. There's nothing you can do about it. It's with all parties. But that's what I see as part of the problem and why we're getting the same old, same old. But again, let's look at what's happening. And Jeff, you mentioned it. We have the tariffs going on. We have the cost of living in Canada is getting out of control. I just finished writing a column for the Winnipeg Sun after seeing a comment on the website from one reader who said he bought a $410,000 home or $20,000 home and paid $43,000 in taxes and fees to the government. $43,000. So $43,000 of his money going to the government so he can have a place to live. And he had to pay that with money that they've already taxed to death. And that doesn't include all the taxes on the construction material, all the taxes, the GST you're paying for the company to build it. It's not included. I mean, really, if you narrow it down, and I'm being facetious, but it's probably 50% of what you pay for a house is going back to the government with money that you've already paid taxes on. This is the little that you get left. So I want to take that and move to that tariff part. How can this government or any government not be sitting here right now saying, look, we can't continue with this tariff war? I believe, and I believe this wholeheartedly, that the liberals want this tariff war right now. I believe that they want this fight with Donald Trump, that it looks good on them, and that this whole patriotism that we're seeing, some of it's legit, some of it's real, but a lot of it is just woke in sheep's clothing. That's all this is. Oh, let's go after Trump. Let's go after the bully. Meanwhile, our country is deteriorating. It's dropping like crazy. We're going to sell oil to the U.S. for more money if we do, right? But we've got to bring it back so we can put gas in our cars. So he puts tariffs, we put reciprocal tariffs on. Canadians have to pay that. The Prime Minister of Australia, I think, said it best. I'm not going to hurt the Australian people by putting reciprocal tariffs on products coming in from the United States. I will continue to fight the United States government to get the tariffs taken off and to negotiate and so on. So why are we ignoring these while this race is going on? And I'm taking us to a different platform now because I'm so tired of talking about Mark Carney. I think he gets more press and attention that he deserves. But how do we now get Canadian people in this election to be about more than just Donald Trump?
Fair question. I think just to wrap up that point, all of our premiers went down to the United States and tried to negotiate with these people. And they are not the kind of people, Donald Trump's people are not the kind of people you can sit down and have a reasonable conversation with. This is a president with psychopathic tendencies. He's a badly damaged individual. Anybody with any experience in psychology or psychiatry or mental health will tell you that this is a badly damaged individual. He doesn't understand rational negotiation. So I don't know what the answer is, but going down and having a reasonable, rational conversation with a man who will not be reasoned with seems to me to be a waste of time. But to your question then, Kevin, how do we divert attention away from that? Because it does play into the Liberals' hands that they can stand up and be the defenders of the country, as Ford was in the Ontario election, right? I'm going to stand up and we're going to take it. The Donald Trump became the key election issue in Ontario. And will it be in Canada as well? And the Liberals will be watching the polls very closely. I'm sure Royce should talk to this, but you got to believe that the Liberals are going to be watching the polls. And if they think they can pull one off, we're headed for an election.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say it. I think that what Doug Ford did was pretty shameful. Taking advantage of a crisis in order to have an early election to get an extended mandate. I don't think that's a good idea. And Carney is probably about to do the same thing. We're going to get a quick election explicitly so that he can leverage this crisis with the United States for his own gain. We need politicians that are going to, approach this sensibly. And thumping our chests, talking about how we're going to fight back and we're going to get our elbows up is maybe not the best way to deal with this. We have to remember that the American economy is obviously a lot bigger than our economy. It's also a lot more nimble and innovative. And so if we do something like I'll give you a good example. There's the idea that we should be throttling oil exports from Alberta to the United States. Great idea. It'll increase prices in the United States, except that we now know that the refineries that we ship oil to in places like Texas can pretty quickly retool to process light sweet crude from within the United States itself. So they start processing their own products. They start more exploration, more drilling. Where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us with the tariffs are actually working for the United States. It'll create jobs. It'll create more drilling, more innovation, and we will be SOL. We will be out of luck. So this is a dangerous situation. We need politicians that are going to approach this sensibly in a clear-headed way, not in the way that we've seen up until now, I don't think.
So would that
I
be
think we
following the
all agree that
pathway of, sorry, Jeff, would that be
sorry,
following the pathway of the Australian Prime Minister as an example? Because that's the one I just wrote about, of saying, I'm not going to put reciprocal tariffs in. I'm going to play this out a different way. I'm going to deal with the Americans. I'm going to negotiate with the Americans and so on, because, to Jeff's point that Trump is difficult to deal with, but maybe just ignore him. He's like a child in the back seat screaming and hollering for more ice cream. And if you give them more ice cream, then they're going to want more ice cream. So should we not be taking that approach and not putting reciprocal tariffs on and allowing that to impact the Americans because he's going to put the tariffs on our products? So I don't know why we punish Canadian consumers and why we would fall for that by saying, yeah, okay, we're willing to pay more for an American product. Because the reality is, and I had this discussion with somebody from the LNG world yesterday, is we have to get gas back from the US. We only have one refinery here for gas, right? So, we can do anything we want, but at the end of the day, all of the chest pounding and Donkey Kong and, action that we want to take is going to hurt us just as much or more than it will hurt the Americans. The reality is this: we don't have the ability to sustain ourselves. The oil goes down to the US, comes back up here for gas. And without that, we're in trouble.
Yeah, I think one of the real challenges when it comes before we leave before we've completely finished flogging the tariff horse, the last time Donald Trump placed tariffs on, I think it was imported washing machines from overseas. And okay, so that sounds great. So we're gonna raise taxes and all that stuff. Good stuff. Going to help protect U.S. manufacturers, but it didn't. It protected the manufacturers because all they did was raise their domestic prices to the same level as the imports, which had tariffs placed on them. So the American consumer wound up paying way more for their new washing machines, but didn't stop there. Because if you're buying a new washing machine, what else are you buying? Probably a new dryer as well. Prices on dryers also went up. So the American consumer got clobbered because of these tariffs on imported washing machines. But the average American consumer, I'm not sure, has been made aware of just how damaging tariffs are. And I don't know if the average, to your point, Kevin, I don't know if the average Canadian consumer understands just how damaging tariffs can be for all of us. Nobody wins in a tariff war. Nobody wins.
Yeah, and American corporations are not the fine corporate citizens that they used to be. I'm sure they're more than happy to gouge consumers, no matter the circumstances. I think one thing that didn't get enough coverage in the last, I guess, week was Doug Ford, after a very long period of threatening, of kind of flamboyant threats to cut off electricity to the United States, then committed himself to doing that. And I believe within an hour of doing so, he changed his mind because of a response and threats from Donald Trump. That is an absolute disaster. We want to project strength, but as we all know, strength is not about thumping your chest. As you said, Kevin, the Donkey Kong routine. Strength can be projected quietly and assertively and confidently. What Ford did was the absolute opposite of that. I actually think he undermined our negotiating position pretty substantially. I'm sorry to be so hard on the guy, but I have not been a fan of his performance throughout this period.
Well, I hope he got a gift package from Donald Trump, because he gave Trump so much to
Exactly.
use online and on Twitter, on X, on Truth Social, that, I mean, and he goes, I said it would be done in an hour and I got it done in an hour. It's like, oh, great. So you just filled his tank. Really, we filled his gas tank to say keep going on this. So we can walk. I mean, here's my thing: is that I did some research and some reading on Ronald Reagan. Right, Ronald Reagan had predicted, even back when he was president, that tariffs are the worst thing for countries. It's the worst thing for Americans. It's the worst thing for trade. It's the worst thing for relationships. He did not think tariffs were the right thing. He was a big proponent of free trade, and he was the founder of Make America Great Again. So I think that we're kind of stuck in this, this world right now where politicians just don't give a beep They don't care. I mean, really, I watch what's going on right now, and all I see is a bunch of politicians. And I think I'm going to stick with the Donkey Kong thing. I want that to catch on. I'd like to see that as a, something on X that trends, all being pretending they're Donkey Kong. Oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to stand firm, we're not going to sell American booze, and or when Canoe, the biggest joke in Canada right now, having all his caucus stand behind him while he does the signing of not selling American booze in a Trump style and poking fun at Trump. Now it gets covered in the New York Post, and people down there are talking about it. All of this is going on, and no one's dealing with the real problems. And I think again that gets back to your point. Tariffs and such, they're not going to help anybody. And this election should be more about Canada than it is the tariffs. So let's just leave that. We could talk about that forever, and you're right. And I'm going to go off on a tangent, and I don't want to. Let's talk about what's too late. Yeah. Let's talk about what's happening right here in Manitoba. We recently saw, and we had talked to her at the Winnipeg Sun, Shelley Glover, mentioned that there is a group of Manitobans that are talking about creating a new Conservative Party. Hello.
Well,
I did say.
Speaking of the Donkey Kong, you've been doing that. You've been beating that chest for a while.
I have been the Donkey Kong of that. Yes, I have been saying there is an appetite for, and there should be a new Conservative Party, because my goodness, the one that's here now is a disaster. And I mean, even the leadership race is a disaster. So, gentlemen, I was right. I know you want to talk about that, but let's not talk about how right I was. Let's talk about what Shelley Glover said and what your thoughts are on a new Conservative Party. Royce, so let's begin with you.
Yeah, you were right. I mean, the interesting connection here is in the PC leadership race. Wally Doddridge has been saying explicitly that if we don't pay attention to the base, if we don't kind of tend to the base, to right wingers, then this is exactly what will happen. Someone will come along and start a new party that will pay attention to the base, and so this supports his argument. And I think maybe this becomes a theme in the remainder of the race, including the debate that we have in Winnipeg coming up next week. I think it's the last debate of the leadership race. These are great discussions to have. Introducing the biggest problem, of course, is that two right-wing parties means the NDP could potentially be in office even longer than they were going to be. Is that cost worth it?
Can I stop you, Royce? Because I want to interject so I don't forget. Is that really going to happen? Because I think what happens right now is that you have so many disenfranchised conservatives with the current mess of a party that they just don't go vote.
Yeah, you could be right. I mean, I think that probably the best case scenario is there's a kind of sorting out period where you have two parties. We saw this in Alberta, where you've got two parties on the right and they have to kind of figure things out. And probably reasonably, it does make the NDP stay in power for longer, but you might be right about that. I think that's a potential cost that conservatives need to be aware of. But people can do what they want to. If they're not happy with a party, yeah, you're totally free to start a new party.
There's a couple of things going on with the current Progressive Conservative Party, and this is maybe where Royce and I part company. I think conservatives are overly obsessed with appealing to the base. I think it's a long-standing problem. The base isn't going anywhere, I don't think. The base is in Manitoba tends to be rural Manitoba and smaller town Manitoba. That's the base. Now that's where the money comes from, and the money has dried up, so that's a problem. But elections are won and lost, as we know, in the city of Winnipeg, and a lot of the soft C, the small C conservative voters abandoned the party in the last election, and I think Glover kind of hit on that point just a little bit the other day. When she was talking about it. And when it comes to attracting a centrist or right of center voter, you have to be able to do that in the city of Winnipeg. And that's kind of the donut. That's in suburban Winnipeg. That's where you're going to get those votes. And that's where a lot of those votes were lost in the last election. And so will a new party that is not socially conservative, because a social conservative party, I don't think has much of a future in Manitoba or anywhere else in Canada. You're always going to get a certain chunk there, but you're not going to win power by advocating socially conservative issues. And so how do you win back some of those sort of small C or those more moderate uh, conservative voters? And it doesn't look like the current party is going to be able to do that. And Avi Khan's latest statement about the landfill search and kind of refusing to say, yeah, we botched that one. We screwed this one up, folks. That's all you have to say. Wayne Owasco did the right thing in the ledge.
Yep.
Um, Apologies in politics are a very rare thing, but Owasco, to his credit, issued the apology. We were wrong about it. We got this wrong. And I think it's fair to say most Manitobans were wrong about this because all of the polling, when Heather Stephenson, then Premier, said, we're not going to do this landfill search, all of the polling indicated that most Manitobans were in support of that position. So most of us have to admit that we were wrong about this. And Avi made, I think, a serious political blunder by not simply acknowledging that the party was wrong. And
But what do you think about him going to Facebook the day after or the day of all the media covering that, going, oh, I didn't mean that. What I meant is I do support it. Like he changed his story entirely, took the other post down from Facebook and put up a new one.
Right. But as you guys know, in politics, if you're explaining, you're losing. Right, Royce? If you're explaining, you're losing.
Yeah, I think Avi probably needs to kind of refine his speaking style a little bit. We all get tired of politicians speaking in sound bites, but sometimes that's a good thing. You could say something in a short bite, so there's no confusion about what you're saying. You don't need to clarify 2 days later. To Jeff's point, I actually think it's a really good point, and I shouldn't caricature Shelley and these people as kind of rabid right wingers. It actually seems to me what really animated them, what really gave them a push, was the landfill issue, which is pretty. I think things are more complex than maybe I presented them when I'm just talking about like right wingers and centrists. Jeff, you talk about social conservatives. I kind of disagree. I think, if we're talking about social conservatives as, your abortion or same-sex marriage, obviously there's not a huge market for that kind of stuff in the general population. But if you're talking about social conservatives as concern about, for example, family issues, supporting families, making life easier for families, that that is a big selling point. It was a big part of the federal Conservative Party's success when Stephen Harper was leader, and it's going to be a big part of their success moving forward. Whatever, if it's a PC party, if it's this new party, they need to find a way to build that kind of appeal into the party, appealing to people on the basis of these kinds of concerns about family without going, as you point out, overboard on some of these socially conservative issues. But I wouldn't reject social conservatism. I think it's a part of conservatism nowadays, and rightly so.
I think that I know in talking to some of the people that have, when I've talked about maybe a time for a new party that have reached out to me, and I think some of them are a part of this group that's having the discussion. You kind of hit the nail on the head, but I believe people are getting smarter, and I think people are getting just really tired of the way all parties are acting and how governance is being done. Jeff, you pointed out, and you've pointed it out in these shows before, the massive amount of debt that we're paying federally, the payments that we make. We're paying massive amounts against our debt in Manitoba. We're paying massive amounts towards our debt at the city of Winnipeg. Governments have lost their way. We have elected people that don't know how to manage tax dollars. They don't know how to manage operations. They've gotten too involved with being morality police or social engineering and not doing the business of government like it was meant to be. I want streets plowed. I got a phone call, and I'm going to take this now into the next part. I got a phone call from somebody who works for Public Works in Winnipeg, who said they just couldn't take it anymore because with a storm that was on its way, they were told, do not think you're going out right away. We think it will melt in a couple of days. So they're being told internally. Now, I can't confirm that that's what happened, but I'm telling you that that's what somebody called me about. And I would play the clip, but I don't want the person's voice to be, identified. But I can tell you that is nothing new. When I was in city council, I would get calls from people that work for the city many times going, we're wasting money like crazy. We're wasting money like crazy. So maybe this new party needs politicians that are starting to look at the realities of what's hurting people.
Right.
Go back to the House, $43,000 in taxes and fees, probably a lot more than that. How much longer can this continue? We're going to pay $500 plus more a year just to live in Winnipeg. And for what?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you were on council, Kevin. Of everybody who's on city council now, how many of those people have ever had to make payroll? And so the
None.
question, yeah, the question being, and again, if you're going to be a finance minister, if you're going to be in charge of budgets, shouldn't you have some kind of background in economics or business, having run a business, having at least managed a company or managed a union, or that kind, where you've had to make payroll, where you've had to look at spreadsheets, where you've had to understand those kinds of things.
But Jeff,
But,
I was
but typically,
vilified. Hang on.
but typically they don't.
I want you to understand, like, get your thoughts on this. I was vilified. I was vilified by media. I was beat up by other council members because every time I would say what you're saying, they would come back to me and say, you have no idea because businesses don't run like governments.
Well, and businesses don't run entirely like governments, but you're
They
talking
should.
about, yeah, and in the city of Winnipeg, it's like about a $1.25 billion corporation, and the mayor and city council is the board chair and the board that runs this $1.25 billion corporation every year. And yes, it should be run like a business, at least on some levels. But you kind of alluded to it. And we've talked about this before about government mission creep, that all governments at all levels in Canada have overreached their core competencies and their core responsibilities so that they don't do anything particularly well. When you talk about the city of Winnipeg, what are the core issues? Well, you need police, fire, paramedic, roads, sewers, bridges, snow removal. I mean, all those core competencies. But the city of Winnipeg, like all levels of government, has started to reach into funding various special interest groups, small museums, all kinds of other areas. So now, well, okay, how are we doing on all those core competencies? And at the federal level, what are our core responsibilities? Well, from a federal standpoint, you need security, right? So you need a military, and by extension, police and a criminal justice system and all that good stuff. And then infrastructure, right? So you need, right? When I say security, I mean you have to have a secure population. Mm-hmm. Infrastructure, okay? So you got the roads, sewers, bridges, you got all that stuff. You need an education system. And in Canada, we agree that at least there's always some debate going on to the extent to which we need a publicly funded healthcare system. And in Canada, we also, as a civilized and compassionate country, we pledge that we will look after those people who cannot look after themselves. How are we doing in all 5 of those core areas? Not so good. What's the reason for that? We're spending money, and government has extended its tentacles into so many other areas that it no longer performs its core duties and responsibilities effectively. And I think all Canadian governments at all level in Canada need to reassess where the money is being spent. You can always because budget time, all the special interest groups show up at city council, do their lobbying, and they make good cases. Our group really deserves to have more money, and it's a worthy cause. No question. Maybe it is. But if it's some small museum or a display somewhere, maybe those people should get back to doing their own fundraising and allow the taxpayers of Winnipeg to get full value for the money that they are spending on core services. Now, that's a long rant, but that's your basic small c fiscal conservative rant for you,
Right.
for all levels of government.
And that's what I think a new party should bring to Manitoba. And I want to back up what Jeff, you're saying. Refer to that story that's on the Winnipeg Sun website. Trudeau spent $11 billion on overseas gender programs during his time. None of that money, and I'm not talking about what he put the money towards, but that money didn't go to any of the 5 items that you just identified that government should be working on.
Yeah, I mean, the real problem with municipal government is that the revenue powers are so constrained, and it makes it even harder for governments, if they allow themselves to engage in this mission creep, it makes it even harder for them to do the fundamentals that they're supposed to be doing. This is how politicians like the late Rob Ford, the mayor of Toronto, this is how he won, by saying, like, I'm going to fill potholes. I'm going to do the things that local government is supposed to be doing. He won on that basis. I think that this all connects to kind of the view. I remember Mary Agnes Welch from Probe Research saying this. I guess it was a couple of years ago. Is there a sense of kind of generalized unhappiness in Canada and Manitoba? Kind of sense that people just feel like we're not well governed. Like they look back in the past, things just aren't going well. We're not well governed, and it has a lot to do with these sorts of issues, and it creates a real opportunity for new political actors, for political entrepreneurs to come in and address that. And we might be in a period, especially with these tariffs, where we are going to see new politicians taking advantage of that kind of sense of unhappiness, feeling that we're just not well governed and no one is addressing it.
I think those are wise words to end this on. We're not well governed. I don't think we're well governed at the city level, the provincial level, or the federal level. So I'm hoping people will get more informed and become more engaged when an election is called. If he calls an election, I think everyone's saying he's going to. I think you guys are right. Who knows if he'll call one? The city one's coming up in a year and a bit, and then we'll have another provincial one. We just have to get more involved.
Well, Kevin, you're right. As somebody once said many, many years ago, like a couple of thousand years ago, that you may not take an interest in politics, but politics is going to take an interest in you. And Canadians need to become more engaged than we are.
Very true. Very true. Gentlemen, thank you. I think it's going to be some interesting times for us on this program. I want to thank everybody for watching and ask them to follow our YouTube page, like it, and share the video. Our hope is to get you more informed as we head into a Canadian election, but also really to inform you about what's going on inside politics, because, as Jeff said, we have to take more control. We have to get more involved and be more focused. Have a great week.